Apresentar rapidinho para vocês, a Media Education hoje é uma agência que faz eventos de marketing digital e a gente está passando por uma grande reestruturação. A gente está reformulando toda a empresa e trazendo algumas iniciativas novas, como essa aqui, que é o ME Pockets, que são palestras para poucas pessoas, a maioria convidados e poucos selecionados. Tanto que a gente abriu para inscrição, tiveram mais de 200 inscritos, a gente ia selecionar 50, a gente acabou selecionando 80 pessoas. Apesar do auditório ser grande, ter 270 lugares, a gente preferiu que fosse mais confortável, que ficasse mais com um tom de conversa mesmo, essa é a ideia. E para quebrar um pouco essa rotina de correria, que seja bem mais tranquilo. Então, assim, vai ter aqui uma apresentação do David, e depois vai ter um debate com o moderador. E vocês podem ficar à vontade para levantar a mão e perguntar, a gente vai com o microfone até vocês. Então é tranquilo, é bem aberto, para todo mundo ficar bem à vontade mesmo. Chamar aqui o Guilherme, que vai ser o moderador. Ele é fundador do Papo de Homem, portal Papo de Homem, editor-chefe hoje, e também da Social Content. Chamar a Gina, que é do Tumblr. A Gina vai se apresentar daqui a pouco, vou deixar isso para ela. E chamar uma pessoa que fez tudo isso aqui, David, CEO e fundador do Tumblr.
Thank you so much for having me. Actually, want me to get up and run through some slides? So just real quick, I wanted to run through. A little bit of the history of Tumblr. I'm sure you guys are. I hope that you guys have had a chance to play with it already. But there's a little bit of a backstory that kind of shows that what it is today was very much an evolution, and it had very humble beginnings. So I wanted to take you through just a little bit of that. So Tumblr, today is really a place to follow the world's creators. And, the number of creators is to the tune of about 50 million bloggers that we have on Tumblr, and they're representative of a lot of different communities, everyone from Lady Gaga to a whole series of craftsmen, designers, photographers, journalists, a lot of really extraordinary talent on Tumblr that generates about 600 posts per second. And those 600 posts, these numbers are actually a tiny bit out of date, reach now an audience of nearly 150 million people all over the world. And those 150 million people today generate about 18 billion impressions per month. So there was really an evolution of it that brought it here, that got it to where it is today. And to start in that evolution, I'll really quickly tell you a little bit about myself. So in the year 2000, in 2000 I was 14 years old, and I went to work during the summer the summer before my freshman year of high school. I just turned 14, which in the U.S. is when you're legally allowed to start working. I went down and got my little working papers. And took that down to my local computer shop where I started selling computers. A year after that, I got my first internship for a guy named Fred Seibert, who's sort of a media mogul in New York City, an extraordinary guy who's produced probably a lot of cartoons you've seen before, everything from Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls up to more recently Samurai Jack and Fairly Odd Parents. So this extraordinary guy who's done everything from run Hanna-Barbera to the original creative director of MTV. Had a neat little company with about 20 people where he was experimenting with a lot of web-based products, mostly targeting young people. And I started working for him with my first real programming job. It was the first time I was going into work, spending all day writing code, and really having a wonderful time doing it. So then in 2002, I was supposed to be going back to high school. I was at this point just having so much fun, learning so much, so enamored with this programming gig that I had, that with the blessing of my parents, I actually dropped out of school to keep working for Fred. Sometime, I was working for him for about a year and a half. Sometime in there, I got introduced to this guy named John Maloney, who was running a company called Urban Baby at the time, which was kind of a social network for parents in cities. So their big cities were Chicago, San Francisco, and New York City. And call came in one day. he was, the programmers that they had been working with previously had, I forget, it was they left the country, they got some new gigs, so he was at the time kind of without his resident hackers, and their website was just featured on, I think it was Good Morning America, it was one of the big TV shows, and their site was exploding. And he was friends with my boss at the time, came into the office asking for anybody who could help kind of quickly scramble and get their site working again. I raised my hand, I jumped in there, gave me passwords for their servers, I jumped in there, tried whatever I did, raised max connections to the database or something, got the site back online, and he started sending kind of work to me from that point on, and at some point I actually jumped out of my job working for Fred and went over to work for John, where I was for the next 3 years. And during those 3 years, I got the bug to pick up and move to Tokyo. So I'd been studying Japanese for a few years, so I dropped out of school, but I was still taking Japanese classes. I was working for John for about 1.5 years at Urban Baby, and I just had my heart broken by the girl that I had been dating for the last 2 years. I'm like, screw it, I need to get out of here. And I picked up and leave for Japan before returning about 1 year later. So there's a little bit of my background. What was really interesting was, so that time I was in Japan, I was actually still working for Urban Baby. And I was at Urban Baby for a total of 3 years. As I was wrapping up there, Urban Baby was acquired by a company called CNET in the US, which recently was, I think it was right after the acquisition was actually then acquired by CBS, so technically now CBS. But that acquisition left me with, thanks to the wonderful graces of John and his team there, left me with a little bit of cash that I was able to use to start my web development company, Davidville. So I hired my first employee. I found this guy named Marco Arment, who you might know today is the founder of Instapaper and a really prolific blogger and technologist. So I found Marco. He was recently out of school. He had a job in Pittsburgh. I found him on Craigslist, flew him out to New York. Somehow convinced him to come work with me, and we started on Davidville, writing software. So this was the original Davidville and then Tumblr office. Started building software for media companies in New York City, having a really wonderful time doing it. Along the way, we were launching a few of our own products. So the first one of those products was something called SendDoIt, which I think is still around today, which is a really simple file sharing tool. So we released this thing. We had this idea for something. We put it together, and it was the first time that we kind of had a reputation now. All of a sudden, we had a TechCrunch article written about our little business. We had 100-something thousand people who were coming up with files every day. It was like pretty cool. It kind of put us on the radar for the first time. And we were really enjoying it. We liked that we could kind of have a presence out there in the world. We would have something to talk to, and we went to conferences or meetups and things. People knew about SendDoIt and were fans of it and of us. And we were able to continue running our little profitable business next to these things that we were doing in public. So the second product that we put out there, so before getting to Tumblr, so just talking a little bit about the state of publishing tools back in 2005. So 2005, if you remember, was the first time we had this proliferation of blogging, and the idea of blogging was becoming an increasingly mainstream idea. Specifically, this idea that you would have a presence on the internet that was you, where you would share the things that you cared about, where you would have an identity that you were proud of, that you would even put that address on your business card, on your resume, that people could Google you to find you, and you'd be identifiable there. And there were a whole bunch of tools for blogging, WordPress, Typepad, Blogger, that were really developed and really good at what blogging had become. The issue for me was that blogging was this kind of editorial thing. It was this very very much about having full articles, about effectively maintaining a newspaper column. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you had these very specialized tools, things like Flickr, YouTube, Twitter, Delicious, that made it really easy to post just one thing. If you've just got a short idea or link to post to Twitter, you're great. If you've got a bunch of photos, sharing them on Flickr is kind of perfect. The issue really came when you wanted to, the issue was more, I'll get to that in a moment. So anyway, so you had on one end of the spectrum, very robust tools that were designed for kind of long-form articles, and then on the other side of the spectrum, these very specialized tools that made it very, very easy, but were limited to one form of media. So I wanted desperately to have one of these things. I had aspired for a few years at that point to be one of those kind of bloggers. I wasn't as concerned about being a pro blogger. I didn't care about the advertising or profiting from this thing. I just wanted to have a presence on the internet like these guys like Jason Fried, Jason Kotke, John Gruber, who I was reading, really enamored with, who were doing this really, really interesting stuff. And the issue was, I'm not really a writer. I can write, I can put an email together sometimes, but I just don't really enjoy writing. So sitting down at the end of the day to spend an hour hammering out a blog post like this was not really, not terribly enjoyable to me, not something that I had the wherewithal to keep doing. So in 2006, I stumbled onto this little community called Tumblr, or calling themselves Tumblr. And they were doing something really kind of novel. They had said, no, we're not doing articles, we're not doing editorial. Instead, we're going to do little bite-sized bits of media. And we're going to wrap them in this really beautiful kind of aesthetic, this beautiful presentation that makes just the quote stand on its own, just the photo stand on its own. So you didn't need to worry about framing it in an editorial voice. You didn't need to come up with a witty headline. You didn't need to format multiple images and align them and write paragraphs of text. Instead, you could just throw up the song that you had stuck in your head. You could just throw up a map of some place you'd just been. You could throw up just a photo that you had taken. Very free form, very raw, because it was just sort of looking through the author's eyes rather than hearing their editorial voice that they were churning out all the time. So there were a handful of these. And at the time that I had kind of gotten the inspiration to build Tumblr, there was this site called the Tumblr List that was indexing all of these sort of novel blogs, calling themselves Tumblr. There were 72 of them on this list at the time. We launched Tumblr in early 2007, and the site had to shut down because there were so many submissions at that point for these Tumblr. But I mean, this was really the community. There were 70 of these things, all just kind of clever hackers who were pulling these tools together to create these sort of novel mixed media blogs called Tumblr. So Tumblr actually didn't start as a service, but just as my own blog. So I wanted to be one of those 70 bloggers. I decided that I wanted something like this. It was perfect for me. It solved the fact that I wasn't a writer, but I could still have something online. I loved the mixed media. I started thinking about all of the different post types that would be relevant to me. And I started designing my blog. And along the way, so this was back in 2006, I'm designing my blog. I'm starting to build the tools to manage my blog. And a company called Technorati, which indexes all of the blogs on the internet, they released the stat that was staggering, absolutely blew my mind, which was the number of blogs year over year was doubling. There was 170 million blogs registered in 2006. Buried somewhere in this post, though, about all of these blogs that were being registered was this other stat that I found even more stunning, which was the number of actively maintained blogs was actually falling. So that number had fallen from about 15 million to 12.5 million. So for all these people who were signing up for blogs, which again in 2005, 2006 was really about this new idea of being a pro blogger or having a presence on the web, the number of people actually doing it was starting to tail off. And I looked at that and saw this discrepancy and realized, some of that spam, some of that's whatever junk it is, but a good chunk of that was probably people like me who really liked the idea of having a presence on the internet, having a blog, but that green line, those tools that they were registering and using, the WordPresses and the TypePads, weren't serving them. So I saw in that big gap a lot of people like myself. So let's see. So that for me became the inspiration to take this little tool that I was building to manage my own blog and actually make that a service that other people could sign up for in Tumblr. And Tumblr has a very simple, started at the very least with a very simple, kind of narrow ambition to be a novel publishing platform. And the things that made it novel were, first, that we let you post anything. The idea was that all of these buttons would expose forms that made it as easy as posting a photo to Flickr, as easy as posting a short idea to Twitter. When you had an essay to post, it was as easy to just as easy as posting it to WordPress, just as easy as posting a video to YouTube, etc. But then we also let you customize everything about it. So it was post anything and customize everything. And you can see here just the amount of control that we gave you, which was, if you want to just choose from one of our set themes, we have thousands of these beautifully designed themes. When we launched, we had 4, but it was still very customizable. As you can see here, we let you just swap out colors, tweak aspects to your theme. And even from the very first day, we let you get in and rip apart the code to create something entirely original. So that was it. In the very beginning, it was post anything and customize everything about your presentation on Tumblr. Just a publishing tool, though, and what happened after that was really an evolution. So, very much what Tumblr is today was, not at all part of the original vision. The first evolution was we realized after we launched this tool that within a couple of weeks, there were a lot of really interesting people using it. So we thought that it was going to be fun to use for ourselves. Here we were excited to tell our friends about it, and we were excited to see if anybody was excited about using it. But what we didn't expect, for whatever reason we just didn't see coming, was there were a lot of really interesting people using Tumblr that we were excited to check out, that we were excited to follow on Tumblr. So the very first evolution was we added these directories. We added the ability to find these other people on Tumblr. So we were doing selects on the database and just dumping out lists of users so we could go and check out their blogs. We launched the directories where now users would submit their blogs and categorize them so we could actually find this stuff. And within a few weeks, it was really within that first month, we saw we found an enormous collection of blogs in a very wide diversity of categories. So music, illustration, animation, writers, all of these people that were just doing fascinating stuff on Tumblr. And we realized that RSS was actually a really crappy way to follow them. So at the time, we had all these blogs had RSS feeds. There were tools like Google Reader and NetNewsWire that made it easy to follow blogs, but blogs which had, up until then, looked like WordPress, looked like movable type. Tumblr content really didn't look very good, didn't work very well inside of those tools. So we were dealing with this issue, and we realized, we have this tool set up already that's designed to present Tumblr content well, called the dashboard, where you edit your content. What if we give you the ability to suck in those other blogs into that dashboard as a nicer way to present it so you don't have to do everything over RSS? At the time, Twitter had just popularized this idea of following content on the internet. It's just a one-way relationship. You just click subscribe, and that's it. You can see all those posts coming in. You don't have to friend anybody. There's no two-way action. And we said, that's perfect. Let's just implement that, and we'll suck those blog posts into the Tumblr dashboard. So we added this follow button. That's when the dashboard started to become what it is today. And something really dramatic happened then, too, which was we went from the normal split that you see on most of these networks where 1% of your users creates the content. Sorry, I should say 1% of your traffic or audience are people creating the content, something you see on Flickr and YouTube, and you used to see on Tumblr. And then 99% of your traffic are the people who come and check out the stuff that people are posting. And it flipped almost entirely, almost overnight. Within a couple weeks, because now we have people following blogs on Tumblr, 75% of the traffic is actually generated by our users following blogs, sitting there hitting refresh all the time. Totally turned the networks on its head and changed the way that we were thinking about Tumblr again. Suddenly it became about this dashboard where people were consuming media. Let's see what else. And up until that point, most of the creative tools we were building were really geared for getting stuff in from outside of the network. They were geared for creating something on your phone and quickly getting that into Tumblr. They were geared around finding something, finding a profound line in an article that really moved you, or finding an obscure Wikipedia page and quickly getting that into your blog. But more and more now, the stuff that was inspiring us, the stuff that we wanted to share, was coming out of the dashboard. We were finding it on this page in these blogs that we were following. And we realized that more and more of the stuff we were sharing was actually just sort of curated, repurposed from this network. So that's when we got this idea to introduce this feature called reblogging, which was largely inspired by, at the time, this sort of YouTube phenomenon, or the YouTube superstar phenomenon of somebody posts one video on YouTube, it ends up kind of proliferating all over the web. All of those plays point back to the original video, and this video gets elevated up in the YouTube community and ends up being one of the most popular videos in the world for a few days or a few weeks. The issues with that were, one, it only works for video, and two, it's actually kind of hard to use. You muck around with HTML, it only works in certain services. It was a little bit of a pain. So our thought was, we can actually make that not only much easier, we can make that a button, but we can make it work for any type of media on Tumblr. So we added this reblog button, and all of a sudden the shape of this network started to change really dramatically. So now not only was it about our users who are following content just as much as they're creating content, but we add this whole new level of curators. So we went from this core community of people who were blogging and making things, pushing original content out there all the time, to now starting to see a whole new category of users starting to show up that I generally describe as curators. They were people who were they weren't maybe getting in front of the camera to play guitar, they were perhaps not creating the illustrations themselves. They were remixing, curating the creative works on Tumblr as their form of expression. And this is another really interesting thing, which is it painted this big surface area around all of this content on Tumblr that made it accessible to a much bigger audience. As those curators started to show up, as they started to organize the content on Tumblr, we started to see more and more people finding blogs on Tumblr and discovering our network. Really cool thing about this graph too, by the way, is that the creators love the curators. The creators sort of define their talent or success based on how many of the curators respond to the work that they're putting out there. The curators are hungry for the creators' content. They admire the creators. That is their main form of expression. That is kind of their tool. So they support and admire those creators. The curators love the audience because ultimately they define themselves as tastemakers. Not all of them, but a big part of being a curator is sort of defining your ability to curate, which is largely built on getting an audience to respond to what you're doing. The audience, of course, loves the creative works, but they love the curators too, because they make it possible to find any possible little niche of anything on Tumblr. So whether that's nail art or Tokyo street style or one particular type of writing or journalism, point of view, really anything at all you're able to find on Tumblr, and it's largely because of that big network of curators who are organizing all of this content into all of these different channels. So from here now we have this big network getting bigger and bigger, and one of the really interesting things that came out of reblogging, came out of the sort of new network features, was communities starting to take shape. So you actually found these this network clustering together with a fashion community over here, and a sports community over here, and a journalism community over here. And for the first time, we realized we've got something that it's got a very different graph than a normal social network, but we see social behavior starting to take place. We find people having meetups where they're getting together to meet the people they follow in real life. We realize that people are becoming friends. They're starting to have recurring interactions. One of the cooler things too is that it was very, very much not limited to people that in real life, but actually span the globe, span interests. It was really just organized around like-minded people who cared about the same things. So just real quick, that's what I got. So just real quick, I'll point out a few things which are today less than half of all of our traffic is generated from the U.S. For the first 2 years, it was majority U.S. That has been quickly overshadowed by international traffic, where Brazil and Australia are two of our biggest markets today. Brazil representing about 12% of all of our traffic. The people using Tumblr has always been tremendously diverse. It never skewed particularly male or female. Ages have always been very evenly distributed. Stuff that we really admire about this community. One stat that I mentioned a few times before that I just love is when you compare Tumblr to a very celebrity-oriented network like a Twitter today, where most of the traffic and attention is vertically oriented, points up to a handful of these celebrities or big brands that drive most of the attention on Twitter. Today on Tumblr, our top 250 blogs, our top blogs only represent 4% of our traffic. So you can just get a sense from that of just how flat this network is and how evenly distributed the attention is. It's something I really admire about this thing. So anyway, with that, it's a quick run through kind of the evolution that turned Tumblr into what it is today. This was very much, if there's one thing to take away from it, it's that this is not that we were so clever, it's that we maybe started with one simple idea that this community took further and further that we just tried to keep up with. And it's turned into something today that I'm really proud of and just thrilled to be working on. So yeah, with that, let's jump into some questions and things. Thank you guys.